Kill Team Into the Dark box set. This $360 box from Games Workshop contains everything you need for the current for last month's season of Kill Team. Hang on a minute, this isn't Into the Dark. Okay, Elegoo didn't really leave that note, just to be clear, but they have sent me this printer to try out, and I thought what better way to do that than to run it through an absolute gauntlet by printing a boatload of terrain and minis in an attempt to try and proxy Games Workshop's latest, recent Kill Team box. So cheers, Elegoo. I'm excited to try your hardware, as up until this point I only have experience with Anycubic machines. And an even bigger cheers to you, dear viewers of the channel. Getting free stuff to use for my videos is a big milestone in this weird and wonderful YouTube experience, so I'll give you my initial impressions of the machine toward the end of this video, but we'll likely do some sort of review once I've spent a little bit longer with it. By the way, no money has changed hands, I'm under no obligations, so if I find anything I don't like about it, I will definitely let you know. Right, so to print the Into the Dark box set, I'm going to need some proxies. The Gallo Dark terrain for me is definitely the highlight of the box. I think GW did a great job with this, and from the moment I saw it, I wanted it, or something like it. So I began my search here and hunted around to see if I could find anything similar out there in the STL verse. Not necessarily one-to-one copies or clones, but rather suitable proxies that share the same DNA or design language, but are unique unto themselves. This is one of the great freedoms of 3D printing, I think. It opens up our favorite universes like Warhammer 40k to many more artists' interpretations, as well as being, let's face it, a hell of a lot cheaper. This actually proved more difficult than I hoped though, and while I did find some pretty great looking terrain kits like this Gothic Spaceship corridor set from Printable Scenery and the Lost Colony Spaceship Graveyard kit from Salsa Man Studios, nothing really struck me as capturing that same claustrophobic, grimdark Space Hulk vibe as the Gallo Dark stuff. I had almost given up on my search when one morning I was scrolling through the Printed Minis subreddit, and then I saw it. Harbinger of Damnation by Wadcorp Designs. A massive set of modular, 3D printable spaceship interiors on Kickstarter. This stuff totally captures that Gallo Dark vibe, and I think would be absolutely perfect for the job. It's even got the little swingy doors, so I got in touch with James, the creator behind Wadcorp Designs, pitched him on the idea of proxying the Into the Dark box set for a video, and he very generously sent me over a pre-release collection of the files. I'll pop a link to the Kickstarter down in the video description where you can get these files too if you like the look of them. But again, no money changed hands here. This video is not sponsored and I'm under no obligations. I just personally am really excited about these models and I want to print them off. So thank you, James, for letting me have some of these files early, and good luck with your Kickstarter, good sir. So with the Gallo Dark proxies sorted, I set about getting this newfangled Elegoo Mars 3 Pro up and running. The printer was really straightforward to unpack and set up. Leveling the build plate was quick and easy, and being spring-loaded, it means you don't have to try and apply any even pressure across the top when tightening down those bolts like you do on other machines, so that's a really nice feature to have. I did install a cheapo flex plate from Amazon first thing, because in my opinion, these are a resin 3D printing must. I'll likely make a video all about these at some point because I think I've figured out every problem under the sun you might run into with these and how to avoid those. But anyway, arguably, the most important step for any new resin 3D printer is calibrating your exposure time to the particular resin that you're going to be using. And sure, there's recommended profiles and those can be a good starting point, but calibrate we must if we're to have a good printing experience long term. Elegoo did send me a 500ml bottle of their water washable resin, but I suspect I'll need a lot more than that to print an entire Into the Dark equivalent set. So I calibrated this machine to what I do have lots of, Anycubic Standard Grey. And here's where things got a little bit annoying. I'm used to running what's called a resin exposure rangefinder test with my Anycubic machines, where in a single print the same model is printed 8 times, each with a different exposure time. This lets you quickly and easily determine the optimal exposure time for your particular resin from a single print, but for the Mars 3 Pro, that's just not an option. Your only choice, I found out, is to print each test back to back. And so it took me a whopping 8 prints and roughly as many hours to get enough exposure tests to find the optimal time for this resin with this machine. This took way longer than it needed to in my opinion, as well as used up an unnecessary amount of nitrile gloves, basically a new pair per test. And realistically, this means that until this feature is implemented, this machine is stuck printing any cubic standard grey, because stuff doing that again for any other type of resin. Now the good news is, Elegoo have heard my feedback on this and they agree it's a good idea, and so have forwarded it onto their engineers. So fingers crossed we do see exposure range finding tests come to this machine soon. I am aware some older Elegoo machines do support this feature through the third-party software UV tools, so perhaps at a minimum we might get support there one day, maybe? But really the best solution is going to be a direct fix from Elegoo. And this is something I think that they could push through in a firmware update. And also, if you're wondering why the hell I'm printing the Ameralabs Town test model and not one of the much faster ones, it's because the Ameralabs Town is hands down the best of the bunch. It takes the longest, sure, but it gives you the most information to determine if you're under or overexposing. I'm going to leave a link down below to a video from Atlas 3D that goes into detail on how to analyze the results of the Ameralabs Town test. And frankly, that video should be mandatory viewing for anyone getting into resin 3D printing. In fact, printer manufacturers should just link straight to it in page 1 of their instruction manuals. That's a joke. That's a lame joke. So with the printer and resin finally dialed in, I began running off back-to-back prints for pretty much an entire week of nothing but walls, doors, and pillars. And I'm stoked to say, other than the initial headache of calibrating the resin, this machine has just been killing it each and every print. I haven't had to re-level it or do anything like that, just slice, print, repeat.
Another successful print from the Elegoo Mars. 3. Mars 3 4K Pro. Incredible, look at that. Oh yeah, and the Sovol, whatever it's called, build magnetic. Knockoff wham bam. Perfect, flawless.
I often hear people say resin 3D printing is a hobby all of its own. And I'm going to call bullshit on that right now. If your build plate is level, you've got your settings dialed in for your resin, and your pre-supported files are well made, then you could just run off prints around the clock and never have a problem.
Oh my god, look at it. It's beautiful.
And if something does happen, like your LCD kicks the bucket mid-print, or maybe you didn't leave enough resin in the vat to complete the print, or the pre-supported files you tried printing were bad, how is 10 minutes here cleaning your vat, or 20 minutes there changing a FEP sheet or LCD a whole hobby unto itself? Sounds more like a little bit of tool maintenance to me. And these things come up so infrequently, I just don't get why people make it out to be some Sisyphean task to use and maintain a resin 3D printer. No, what's more than likely happening is people are trying to print poorly pre-supported and untested files and running into constant failures that way. Because unfortunately, crappy pre-supported files are an incredibly common and pervasive issue in this new industry. And so that's in large part why I make these videos, so I can shine a light on who's producing printable files well, and who is not. It's why I made a whole tiered rating system for the creators of 3D printable miniatures. And it's why now, with the help from the great and talented Akshay, totally pronouncing that wrong, sorry buddy, over on Fiverr, have created a resource where anyone can contribute ratings and leave reviews for creators of 3D printable minis. You can think of it like Rotten Tomatoes, but for the makers of STL files. So if you're a die-hard fan of 3D printing minis for your tabletop games like me, and you're fed up with the large swathes of shitty files out there as well, then please consider adding your voice to mine. Check out Mini Raider at the link in the description and go sing the praises of the creators who are going above and beyond for us, and put the pressure on those who don't care to do better. And together, we can hopefully mold this into a powerful resource for the 3D printing community. Something to be shared with newcomers who want to know whose files they should print first, as well as for seasoned veterans to reference when you just want something to print without all the hassle. This was initially just going to be a document for me to log my own personal findings, but I'm just one dude and could never review them all. So opening it up to the community, I hope can bring us one step closer to a world where 3D printing is as easy as just leveling your build plate, calibrating your resin, and just picking from a list of known good creators for quality files to print off. I think a good way to really get the ball rolling on this too would be to message your favorite printable mini creators on Patreon, Discord, tribes, via email, whatever means you can, and ask them to ask their members, their communities, to leave them honest ratings over on Mini Raider. I have a feeling most won't be interested, but the ones who know they're doing a good job should be more than willing to hear the feedback from their members on this platform. Okay, that's enough about Mini Raider. I'll climb down off my soapbox now and get back into proxying this Kill Team box. While I couldn't print all the files from the Harbinger of Damnation release that James had sent me, mainly the flaws, I was able to print just about everything else, and I'm happy to say he's done a mostly good job with the pre-supported files. I was a bit concerned when I saw that these wall pieces were pre-supported with the bottoms directly parallel to the build plate. And while this did result in a little bit of warping on some wall pieces with a few disconnected support tips at the corners, none of these parts were outright failures, and so for me, I'm more than happy to keep them and use them. The closest thing to a real failure I had was this final plate of walls that I ran off. I had just shy of enough resin in there to see the job through, so the last few layers were a bit spotty. But luckily again, not that bad, and still totally usable, and yeah, completely my fault. Oh, there was one little problem though. Just about every one of the pre-supported STL files had minor errors, which Lychee's auto repair tool was unable to deal with, and judging by the way this slice preview looks, wouldn't have been a good idea to print as is. Luckily, I was able to resolve these issues using the Microsoft 3D Builder auto repair tool, resulting in a much cleaner slicer output. I don't know how, but Microsoft just knocked it out of the park with 3D Builder, man. It's so good. Nothing else even comes close. Anyway, I've let James know about this, and he's assured me he will deal with those errors for the final release, so you won't have to put in the same work that I did. Overall, other than a little bit of warping and those errors, it's been a pretty positive printing experience with these files, and I can happily slot them into A tier. The only painful part of this whole process was the washing and curing, but that's just resin printing for you. I dumped all the parts into a bin as I went so I could just wash it all at the end in one go, and my god, this must have taken a good hour. Still faster than building plastic kits, but yeah, this really made me want to get one of those automatic wash and cure stations. Oh, and I almost forgot, and I really appreciate this, and if you saw my previous video, you'll remember I made a big point of it. But these files have been designed to have no islands or overhangs, meaning if you want to print them directly on your build plate with no supports on your filament printers, you absolutely can. And I guess you technically could do the same with your resin printer too, but I would probably still recommend the pre-supported files for resin printers. But yeah, that's pretty damn freaking sweet. Time to paint. And we'll get to the rest of the Into the Dark box set soon, but first I want to paint up this terrain. There's a lot to get through here, so I wanted to keep the painting as simple as I could while still getting a cool result. But even so, this still took me a whole evening to do, beginning with priming all the pieces in black. I began by immediately overcomplicating the process by mixing orange and blue paints to produce brown. Despite my best efforts, I just couldn't find any brown paint. I'm sort of halfway through converting the living room into a 3D printing and video production studio at the moment, so everything is in a bit of a state of chaos. But Google assured me that these two colors would make brown, and sure enough, that looks brown. Where this quickly became a problem though was after stippling this mix on a bunch of the wall pieces, I ran out and had to mix up more, and what I mixed up next was more green than brown. But throwing caution to the wind, I said fuck it and started stippling on my new green color, and went back over the pieces I'd already done in brown as well. This time I managed to get through all the parts before running out, and decided I'd repeat the same process again, but this time I'd mix it more blue heavy, and while we're at it, why not use a completely different blue as well? This actually started to look pretty cool, has that sort of oxidized copper or brass patina thing going on. After this step, I took straight up orange and stippled this very sparingly on each piece. It might have been a better idea to transition to this bright and orange in more layers, but I still think it kind of works. For the next step, I wanted to do a wash, and I was originally thinking of just doing the same old burnt umber and ivory black oil wash, but then I remembered I have a pot of AK Interactive streaking grime that's been sitting on a shelf unloved for months and months now, and that has a kind of murky green-brown thing going on that might just work really well here. So I slopped that all over everything, let it dry for about an hour, and then came back in with some cloth and mineral spirits to wipe away the excess and hopefully leave the grime in all the recesses. I found this step to be really satisfying, watching the blues and greens and oranges pop back out. Finally, I'm not sure it really needed this, but whatever, it's too late now. A dry brushing of Balthazar Gold, followed by Necron Compound a little more sparingly. I both love how this looks and love how it looked before as well. The dry brushing kind of muted down those colors from earlier, so all the variation and randomness in the paint job is much more subtle now. Cool if you look at it up close, but less impressive at a glance now. Still though, this shit looks pretty freaking grimdank and gallow dark. As for how it all goes together, the tolerances are really good. They've been designed with more than enough slack so that you don't have to force anything to fit, it all just drops into place. It can be a little fiddly to set up a board, but certainly not complicated. Overall, I'm really impressed with this kit, and it's nice too that it can be all broken down and stored away conveniently. Right, so now we need some kill teams to fight it out in the gritty bowels of this Space Hulk. Let's start with the Imperial breaches. I honestly thought going into this project that this would be where it all falls down, that I wouldn't be able to find anything at all close to these new minis from GW, but man was I wrong. Check this out, Solar Guard of the Imperial Force by Redmakers. When I saw these, my jaw pretty much hit the floor. Not only are they a perfect fit, I like them even more than the GW minis. This goes back to what I was saying earlier, how 3D printing our Warhammer lets us enjoy our favorite franchise through the lens of different artists. And this is such a good example of someone outside and unrelated to Games Workshop bringing their own unique style to the table and just absolutely killing it. I love these so much. But seeing Redmakers on the tin for me was cause for concern, as I've been critical here on this channel in the past on Redmakers for subpar pre-supported files. And I half expected I was going to be spending many hours resupporting these minis from scratch to get them ready for this video. My initial findings in UV tools didn't look that great. There were unsupported islands, which I've come to expect from Redmakers, but taking a closer look at these islands back over in the slicer, I found these to be false positives, likely due to the minor errors in these files, but they do actually have supports on them, and this is actually looking pretty promising. So I loaded up a plate, and I was able to fit all 10 minis from the Solar Guard kit onto the build plate for a single print. So going back to the Mars 3 Pro for a second, this build volume is awesome. It's not so large that it's a pain in the ass to post-process, but it's large enough that you can fit a good number of minis on there. Like, this is a whole kill team essentially printed in one go in just a few short hours. Love this size build plate. But how did the print turn out? Well, honestly, these supports were an absolute joy to remove, and they've done well to improve since the last time I printed some of their minis. These minis printed great with no failures at all, and so I'm really pleased to be giving Redmakers an A tier rating today. So good job guys, I'm stoked to see you improving. Now let's just see these packaged up nicely without any errors, and throw in some renders and slicer files for us too, and you might just get an S tier rating, Redmakers. These models do a really great job too at showing off the level of detail the Mars 3 Pro is capable of achieving. When I eventually get around to doing a proper review, I'll include comparisons, but essentially one of the big benefits I'm seeing here to the 4K resolution packed into a smaller screen is the tighter pixel density, which is giving noticeably sharper prints compared to my Anycubic Mono X, which is also 4K, but less pixel dense due to the larger screen. but even that looks sharper than the 2K screen of my Photon S, so 4K does make a big improvement no matter which way you slice it. Not sure yet how I wanted to paint these guys up, and frankly a bit intimidated by the amount of fine details on them. I decided to sort out the Kroot kill team first, and now this is where this video falls down. Kind of. Because for the life of me, I just couldn't find anything that really jumped out at me like the proxies for the terrain and the breaches did. I was able to find these automaton conscripts from Cyberforge, but not really feeling it. Another possible option was the jackals from One Page Rules, and while these are pretty cool, they're not really working for me personally either. You know what, I've never been much a fan of Kroot anyway, and that's probably the issue here more than anything, but this is a 3D printing video, and 3D printing is freedom. I think Gene Stealers would be way cooler for this close quarters Space Hulk combat, and I've had these awesome sculpts from Puppetswar sitting in my My Mini Factory library for about a year now, so I think it's time to put them to good use. I've never even downloaded these, I don't think, so I'm keen to see what the Puppetswar experience is going to be like. Oh my god. Look at this. Renders, well-organized files, they've even got the LYS files in there. Everything is pre-supported, even the bases. I feel like I've been wading through shit for so long now on this channel, it's as though I've woken up from a bad dream seeing files presented to me like this. And maybe, just maybe, there's hope for 3D printing, that creators can get it right. Yeah, nah, not today. A quick check with UV Tools revealed some unsupported islands, and double checking in the slicer confirmed them. Also, a bunch of the STL files with pre-baked supports had minor errors too, same as Redmakers. So come on guys, a few minutes in 3D Builder would have dealt with those. These are larger minis, so I wasn't able to fit all 10 in a single print and had to divide them across 2 prints. But even so, I was able to print all of these off in a single evening, and I'm happy to say not a single failure despite the unsupported islands. They turned out beautiful, none of the supports failed, and yet all came away easily. Puppetswar came so close to getting an S tier rating here, as this was a printing dream, from the packaging and preparation to the printing and post-processing. But the minor errors and unsupported islands have held them back, so for me, it's an A tier rating for now. Which hey, is still perfectly respectable, so good job Puppetswar, this was really nicely done. I still found myself really undecided how I wanted to paint all these minis up. The not Gene Stealers too, so I decided I'd run some experiments. I like the way the yellow breacher turned out, and the purple not Gene Stealer with bone-coloured bones. So I primed everything black, followed by a dry brush of white. Then for the breaches, it was a simple task of ignoring as much of the detail as possible, and just blocking in most of the armor in Zealot Yellow, followed by Gravelord Grey for everything else, except their bags, gloves, and some of the butts of their guns, which got a coat of hardened leather. I then followed this up with a pretty thin oil wash of burnt umber and ivory black, and then something I almost never do, edge highlighting, but quick and dirty edge highlighting, not trying to be too pedantic about it. To get my highlight color, all I did was mix a tiny drop of the Zealot Yellow into some white acrylic paint, just to tint it. You might have noticed some of these guys have little nameplates on the bases, and these names belong to the wonderful folks who have bought me coffees. So massive thanks to Haste Hobbies, Tin Bear Studios, Newman, and James Q. You guys fucking rock. This is my tribute to you, and I hope you like it and that you're enjoying the extra goodies over there in the member area as well. If you'd like to help me grow this channel and become a member too, be sure to check out the link in the video description. For the not Gene Stealers, I prepared a 50-50 mix of Purple Alchemy and Grim Black and painted this all over their fleshy bits, followed by Pallid Bone all over their carapace and claws. I then mixed a drop of Purple Alchemy into some white acrylic paint and dry brushed this all over their skin to bring up the highlights a bit. I was really enjoying the way these were coming together, so I decided to take it even one step further and do a pass of these edge highlights to their skin by mixing a drop of blood red into some white to make a really bright pink color. And once more, edge highlighted in a really fast and loose way, not spending more than 5 minutes or so per mini. This really does take the paint job to a whole new level, so it's something I think I'll keep playing around with moving forward. And with that, our alternate kill team Into the Dark box set is now finally ready for the tabletop. So let's get a good look at it now in all its glory, and be sure to stick around because afterwards I'll tell you about my experience with the Mars 3 Pro printer, what I like and don't like about it, and if I think it's a good choice for tabletop gaming.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, what's up?
Your set is incomplete.
Yeah, look, I know, but I'm out of time and I have to finish editing this video.
But sir, I have located suitable barricades, servo skulls, and the Harbinger set has the appropriate scatter already.
Thanks, but I really think this video is long enough as it is.
You mean incomplete, sir?
For fuck's sake. There, are you happy?
No, sir.
What now?
The rules, sir.
The rules. The rules. Sure, okay, yeah, the rules.
Sir, that's not...
So, all these models were printed on the Elegoo Mars 3 Pro in the space of about a week. Overall, this printer was an absolute joy to use. Yes, calibrating the optimal resin exposure time was an exercise in self-flagellation, but Elegoo have heard my cries about this, they think it's a good idea, and hopefully we see that come to the Mars 3 Pro soon. I can't comment on how effective the carbon filter is because I didn't realize until after I'd printed all this stuff that, yeah, that thing is plastic wrapped and you kinda need to unwrap it for it to work. So yeah, I'm a moron and should have read the instructions rather than just diving in head first, but live and learn. I'll be sure to do plenty more prints with it now that it's properly set up, so I can let you know down the line if I think it's good enough, or if it needs the once in a 6-side magnetic extraction system to help keep the smell down. But for now, I love the form factor. I think the build volume is perfect for basically 99% of our needs. The construction feels solid, it's got nice grippy rubber feet on the bottom so it sits confidently wherever you plonk it down. I enjoy the USB port being on the front. The UI is really nice, clear and simple to understand, and the touchscreen seems accurate and very responsive. Though you can't pause a print or get a print time estimate until at least the very first layer is done, which is a little quirky. I like being able to get print time estimates right away so I can pick whichever job best suits my schedule next. Okay, so I've got exactly 2 hours before I need to leave for work, and I need to know which one of these would be best to do. But I don't know how long that's going to take. I love the pause feature because the build plate actually rises up out of the vat, and so you can check really early on in the print if you have good build plate adhesion. The spring-loaded bed is awesome because it makes leveling it even more idiot-proof. There's a nice access port on the rear as well for when you're a moron like me and unscrew the Z homing sensor and drop it into the housing. I also saw that it has this split lift speed feature too, which I haven't seen on any of my other printers. This is really nice and seems to help print even faster by traveling half the lift distance first at this speed, then ramping up to this second speed for the remainder of the lift. Very clever, and I like that. The build plate actually moves all the way to the top of the Z-screw thingy at the end of your print, regardless of how tall your print is. I can't believe I'm pointing that out as a pro, but my Anycubic Mono X doesn't do that, and it's infuriating because after a print ends, it just stays at whatever height it finished at. And so you've then got to go menu diving and tap the up button 20 times to get the thing to raise up so you have enough room to get in there and pull the print out. So I love that the Elegoo just does that by default. I also like that the vat has little feet on it so you can put it down on a tabletop or whatnot, and the FEP won't come into contact with anything. But whatever you do, don't forget to reinstall these bolts anytime you remove the vat. Oh my god. Yep, nope, not doing that again. Also, I like the vat clean function, And finally, just the print quality is by far and away better than anything I personally have experienced yet. The Mono X blew me away with its quality compared to my Photon S, and this blows me away again. It really is noticeable, the improvement in quality here, so if you care about that sort of thing, you can't go wrong with this printer. Oh, it is kind of noisy though. Kind of a noisy fan on this thing. I'm just standing over to the side of it here, so I'm about the same distance from the camera, and we're listening to the camera microphone. And yeah, there's quite a little buzz it's got. Every 3D printer I've ever had has come with a noisy fan. It would have been nice for that trend to have changed with this one, but I've kind of come to expect it now. Oh, but that fan is always on when the printer is on. Now that is kind of annoying. My other printers, the fan only comes on during printing, which makes sense because only when the UV light is on is any significant amount of heat being generated. That seems like something they could fix in a firmware update as well. Printing done. And just like that, the fan's off. That's awesome. Bugs. Now it's printing and the fan's on. Stop. Confirm. Perfect! That's exactly how it should work. Awesome. Which I think just leaves the price to talk about. Now, it's not cheap. It is about 450 Australian dollars or 300 American. And if it's your first 3D printer, you've got to factor in some kind of washing and curing setup as well, nitrile gloves, resin, and all the rest of it. So you could easily be talking $500-600 here, up front. However, if you're considering this for tabletop gaming, especially wargaming of the Games Workshop variety, it pays for itself essentially the moment you print your first army, or massive modular terrain set and a handful of kill teams, for example, when compared to GW prices. But it doesn't really end there, because what you now have is the ability to manufacture basically anything you could ever want. And you will find the wealth of STL files out there to be just incredible and addictive to trawl through. And every subsequent project you print, that cost just goes down and down and down until you're printing whole kill teams or warbands or whatever for just a few bucks each. This entire project, by the way, in terms of just resin costs, used a little over 2 liters of Anycubic standard grey. If you bulk buy this stuff on eBay like I do, you can sometimes pick it up for around $25 a litre, which is pretty hard to beat, especially given how far a litre of this stuff can go. There's plenty of great videos already here on YouTube that can give you a good idea of how far 1 litre of resin goes, and I may even make one of those myself too at some point. That could be fun. But yeah, roughly $50 worth of resin for all of these models, and I can keep going and print even more if I want. That's the beautiful thing about having a resin 3D printer. Fun fact, when I bought my very first 3D printer, the Anycubic Photon S, that cost the same price as this does now, roughly 450 Australian dollars. And at the time, to me, that felt worth every last cent, and I was not disappointed. And so if I were getting into 3D printing now, I don't think I'd be disappointed at all if this were my first 3D printer. Just please, please, pretty please, Elegoo, give us an exposure rangefinder function soon. I can still recommend this printer without it because it's not the end of the world. Calibrating is not something that has to be done often, but not having this feature does make the calibration a lot slower and painful than it needs to be. And that is by far really the only criticism I have for this otherwise phenomenal machine. So good job, Elegoo. You've made a nice printer here that seems for the most part very well thought out, built well, and a solid choice for tabletop gaming. And thank you for sending it over to me. It's been really fun to test it out. Also, well done to James over at Wattcorp Designs. This modular terrain set is fucking awesome. So thank you for allowing me to get it early and put it to use for this video. Big props to Redmakers and Puppetswar too. I'm so glad to see Redmakers improving the quality of their pre-supported files, and Puppetswar, you guys are absolutely nailing the end user experience. It was really refreshing to be greeted by such well thought out packaging. I'd just like to see your pre-supported files get a little bit more love. A-tier ratings well earned for all the creators featured in this video, which has really just made it an absolute joy to produce. And so I'd definitely recommend to anyone interested in recreating this 3D printed version of the Kill Team Into the Dark box set to, give it a go. So let me know. If you could make your own custom Kill Team starter box set, which minis would you throw in there? And if anyone has any leads on good Croup proxies I might have missed, I'd love to hear about those too. Thank you very much for watching, and if you'd like to support the channel and help keep these videos coming, be sure to check out the link in the description. You get a bunch of cool stuff for your money too. I'll be back in 2 to 3 weeks with another one. Thanks again, and bye.
Sir. What kind of voice? What kind of voice would it have? What kind of voice would it have? Probably this kind of voice.